Our final speaker is Dr. Walter Feldman, a leading researcher of Ottoman Turkish and Jewish music and a performer on the Ottoman tanbur and Klezmer cymbal. Today, he'll present his paper titled Mevlevi, Iranian Musicians and the Science of Music in Ibrahim Cevri's description of the singers at the court of the Sultan. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Feldman.
Well, hello, friends and folks. I'm very sorry not to be able to be there in person, but I'm far away in New York at the moment. I'm going to have to read some of this, which means I need to put on different glasses. Excuse me. Yes. So let me know if I'm not being clear, whether you hear me or not. So we're talking about the Tarifi Hanedegani Sarai Padishahi, which was written around 1635, we think, by the poet Ibrahim Cevri, who lived from 1595 to 1654. It was, of course, written in Istanbul. He is talking about the court of Sultan Murad IV. It's a short mesnavi of 53 baits in Turkish. In this elegant mesnavi, Ibrahim Cevri conveys basic realities of the music of the Ottoman court in the first half of the 17th century. Cevri, as both a leading poet with courtly connections and a Mevlevi follower, Muhib, was in an ideal position to relate his impressions of the music of the Ottoman court. Now, written around 1635, this description offers us a glimpse into the formative generation within the creation of what would become Ottoman music. Cevri distinguishes between the musical genres of the science of music and more popular forms. For the science of music, the dominant musical genres were still those of Greater Iran. Turkish musical genres play a subsidiary role, and only within Ashik music, the professional music of the oral tradition. Several of the leading court musicians were either Iranians, Mevlevi and Halveti dervishes, or their students. They were not the majority, but they were extremely prestigious. He talks about a dozen musicians, describes them, of which 4 are in this category. No non-Muslim musician appears at all, which is a big difference between this generation and the next generations in Istanbul. Now, brief though the text is, it stresses the existence of the science of music, what in the West we would call art music. This art music relied on a complex system of both maqam modes and rhythmic cycles, usul, as well as the improvised taksim. While the taksim had been developed rather recently within Istanbul and Edirne, all of the genres of art music cited here are of Persianate origin. The only clearly Turkish forms are connected with the Turkish ashik. None of the incipient sophisticated vocal forms of Turkish origin documented at exactly the same time by Ali Ufuk Bey are mentioned at all. Likewise, the well-known pseudographic compositions attributed to the great Azerbaijani composer Meravi are not mentioned. The latter were created or came to be known in Turkey only toward the end of the 17th century. Excuse me. Private master-student relationships are stressed rather than any school operating within the court. Now, Cevri was one of the strongest poets of the first half of the 17th century. He was one of the founders of the Fresh, or Indian movement within Turkish literature, which was based on the Persian poetry of Mughal India. Cevri was neither a member of the court, nor a full Mevlevi dervish, but he had connections with both institutions. According to Evliya Çelebi, he frequently participated in the Saturday night poetry evenings arranged by Sultan Murad IV. He was by profession a calligrapher and had studied at the Yeni Kapı Mevlevi Hane. He made many copies of the Mesnevi of Rumi, some of which are still extant. The Yeni Kapı Mevlevi Hane had been functioning since 1597, 2 years after his birth. Galata had reopened in 1610. Both Beşiktaş and Kasımpaşa Mevlevi Hanes were opened in 1622. So there was, in his generation, already a significant Mevlevi presence within Istanbul. Now, here's my translation of the beginning of the short Mesnavi. I'll only refer to a few of the musicians. He says, "Oh, my magic dispensing pen, the time for discourse has arrived. Let your speech overflow, describing the men of skill. Enumerate all of the singers and players who now appear at the imperial private chambers. Prepare versified encomiums for every one. Begin to speak. Spread out your jewels, on my tongue." One of them is Hanende Ali Agha. At every moment with his breath he revives the dead. When he commences to sing as taksim with two couplets, he demonstrates the maqams according to the theory of music. In complete harmony, he sings naqsh, saut, amel, and kar. He reveals his magical power while he demonstrates their movements. He had studied the science of music with Dervish Omer. We stand in profound admiration both to the teacher and to his student. Now, Cevri's verses contain two separate terms for musical theory or art music: Kavle Edvar, according to the theory of music, and musiki ilmi, the science of music. Toward the end of the Mesnavi, he characterizes artistic music linked with the revolutions of the heavenly spheres, so that the 9 circles of the heavenly chain may revolve, so that the science of rhythm and cycles may be performed. Ta ki daur eyleye nuh daire-i çemberi çarх, ta ki icra uluna ilmi usulu edvar. Both of these terms are constructed with the word ilim, science. They can refer to both to the actual practice as well as to the theory. Emphasis here on rhythm and cycles is connected with the universal Islamic use of complex rhythmic cycles for compositions within the art music. These included the Persian amel, kar, and saut that originated in the 15th century. Now, even before the Ottoman era, the artistic music of Anatolia had been linked to that of Greater Iran. Anatolian Turkish composers, performers, and theorists have contributed to this repertoire. Many of the musicians over the centuries have been members of the Mevlevi order of dervishes founded in the 14th century by the son of Mevlana Rumi. This Sufi order had emphasized the unique composed repertoire for their ceremony, as well as the involvement of their dervishes in the general artistic music. So, although Sultan Murad was not deeply involved with any Sufi order, he invited leading Mevlevi and other dervish musicians into his court. The excerpt from Cevri's Mesnavi mentions 2 of these, Tokatlı Dervish Omer and then Chengi Yusuf Dede. Now, Dervish Omer was the teacher of the Hanende Ali, who begins the poem. Dervish Omer was one of the key musicians of the period from Tokat in central Anatolia. Evliya Çelebi had been his student. Omer was both a Gülsheni and a Mevlevi dervish. At the same time, he composed instrumental peshrevs, which were notated both by his contemporary Ali Ufukî Bey and later by Kantemir. He had been the lead singer, the Hanende Bashe, early in the reign of Murad IV, who appreciated him to the extent of calling him father, peder. Directly following the Hanende Bashir, Cevri describes the Iranian oud player, Avad Muhammad, emphasizing the continued prestige of the Persianate repertoire and performance. And he writes, "Another is Muhammad Udi, by origin a Persian. In Rum there is still no rare performer equal to you." Later he describes the Iranian tanbur player. "Another is the Persian tamburi named Ramadan. It would also be tasteful for me to praise him." The leading flautist in the orchestra was Yusuf Dervish. The reed flute, of course, was the instrument of the Mevlevi dervishes. This person was evidently Chengi Yusuf Dede, who was also Nezen and later Sheikh of the Beşiktaş Mevlevi Hane and the author of the Risale-i Edvar. As a harpist, Chengi Yusuf Dede also composed secular pieces. In his own book, Risale-i Edvar, he presents the usuls by saying, "Our saint Hazreti Mevlana, may his secret be blessed, by continually whirling with this love, invited us to the world of true meaning." These eloquent lines accord well with Cevri's generous description of the musical, spiritual, and literary associations of Cevri's performance, which we'll get to in a moment. Returning to Dervish Omer, his theoretical knowledge of the science of music was linked to the specific artistic repertoire that he was able to form and to teach at the court. And it's only in the case of his student Ali Agha that Cevri takes the trouble to indicate what this repertoire had been. and as I've shown you, it was all in the Persianate, except for the Taksim. And as we know, the Taksim had been developed in the Ottoman Empire. Contemporaneous evidence, I should go back for a second to our wonderful Mevlevi Dervish Yusuf, and this is how Cevri describes him. Another one was Dervish Yusuf, who with his ney vivifies the spirit of Mevlana. Through the aid of Mevlana, he finds the breath of the soul. With his every breath, he alludes to pure spiritual blessing, while his ney reveals the secrets of the heart. Like the Mevlevis, he causes the whole creation to whirl. If the sound of his ney were to enter the universe of spirits, the souls of Sana'i and Attar would start to dance. Now, the contemporaneous evidence demonstrates that the Persianate composed repertoire was still well known in Bukhara and also Mughal India. Roughly at the same time that Cevri penned his Mesnavi, we know that Mutribi Samarkandi visited Lahore in 1627, where the Mughal Emperor Jahangir requested a Sultan Amal in the complex Usul Nim Sakil. So thus, in the time of Murad IV, exactly the same period, in the first half of the 17th century, the court in Istanbul would still see itself as constituting a link in this vast Persianate musical chain. Cevri's only reference to vocal music that must use Turkish text occurs toward the very end of the Mesnevi, in describing Çavurcu Muhammad. The çavur was an instrument of the saz family of folkloric long-neck lutes. Cevri praises Muhammad's performance, and he compares him with the semi-legendary bandit and ashuk minstrel Garolu. One of them is Muhammad the çavur player. Taking the çavur in his hands, he creates magic as he strikes the notes. While oud and tanbur give song through their melodies, it is enough for him to bewitch with the charm of his hands. When he creates harmonious song at the gathering, his melody will not allow the besotted eye to fall into drunken sleep. Out of shame to acknowledge his çavur's perfection, even poor Garolu would flee to oblivion. Thus, in the period of which Cevri is speaking, songs in the Turkish language would be typically folkloric. Cevri's emphasis on the hand movement used by Muhammad in plucking must be related to the various finger strokes used by both the Anatolian and the Central Asian Kazakh lute players, which still have specific Turkic language terminology, like çarpma. And it's very visual, unlike an oud player or a tanbur player who must hold a plectrum. We know from a variety of sources that a more artistic repertoire using poetic texts in the Ottoman Turkish language was then in the process of formation, even toward the middle of the end of the 16th century and the middle of the 17th century. Cem Behar, in his book from 2020, Orada bir Musiki var Uzakta, describes the music in several Turkish language mejmu'ahs from the late 16th century. And of course, our own Judith Haug has been working on the two manuscripts of Ali Ufuki Bey, which contain several items described as murabba, using various literary registers of the Turkish language. Nevertheless, no such genre is included in Cevri's description of the courtly repertoire of the 1630s. So this Turkish repertoire, no doubt, was being performed at the court in other associations and other situations, but not in this highest level concert for the Sultan. Later, early in the 18th century, Sheikhul Islam Esat Effendi does cite a murabba beste in the Usul Devri Revan by the same Cengi Yusuf Dede. But Yusuf Dede lived until 1669, so his musical productivity continued for almost 40 years after the scene that Cevri is depicting here. And those 40 years were crucial for the development of Ottoman music. Thus, Cevri's poem offers us a glimpse of the formative generation within the creation of what would become Ottoman music. It also stresses the crucial role that Mevlevi musicians would play in the creation of this secular artistic music. Thank you. I'll stop here.